everyone, it's Matt, and today I will be talking to you about all of the video games I played during 2019. And I guess to be more accurate, I won't be talking about each and every video game I played, but instead the video games that I started in 2019 and that I played for more than just a few minutes. So, if I started the game in 2019 and have played at least a few hours of it, I will be talking about it today. So, I'm just gonna tell you my thoughts, what I think, a sort of mini review / impressions, depending on how far I got in the game, etc. And I do hope you enjoy it. So, here we go. Start us off, and I will be doing these in roughly chronological order of the order I played them in. But to start us off, we have Kingdom Hearts 3, the deluxe edition with this shiny cover in a very thick box. It's also got a steelbook case inside of it and an art book and this pin here that you can see. But anyway, Kingdom Hearts 3 is not, as some of you might be thinking, the third Kingdom Hearts game. I'm not entirely sure what number it is, but we may even be into double digits at this point. But it is the third mainline Kingdom Hearts game. It's the third major one, depending on how you define major. Kingdom Hearts is a series of games notorious for its very convoluted and incomprehensible at times storyline. So, depending on how you look at it, this may be the third mainline game, or the fifth, or the sixth, or it's not worth really getting into that either way. This is, of course, the latest Kingdom Hearts game, and the one that the most people were begging for many years. And I must say that I enjoyed it quite a bit. I would say it is probably my favorite Kingdom Hearts game. But that is not to say it is without flaws. Like many of the other Kingdom Hearts games, the story can be a bit overly convoluted and somewhat incomprehensible at times. And this is coming from someone who has played or at least watched the cutscenes of all the other Kingdom Hearts games. So, if you're thinking about jumping into this one as your first Kingdom Hearts game, or even after only playing 1 and 2 instead of the side stories like 358 over 2 days, or 358/2 days, I forget how you say that title. Kingdom Hearts has some weird game titles. Either way, I would not recommend this until you are fully caught up on the story, for sure. But if you are fully caught up on the story, I do think it was a very good game overall. It has fantastic production value, which is basically what propels every Kingdom Hearts game from being a weird, difficult to understand story into something emotional and nostalgic and many other things at the same time. And I thought the gameplay was the best of all the Kingdom Hearts games. A lot of people were complaining that the game was too easy, and though I cannot disagree that it was very easy. For me, Kingdom Hearts has never been a game that I play for the challenge. In fact, I prefer it to be easy. If I want a challenge, I'll play something like Dark Souls or Cuphead. But either way, there's not a ton I can really do to describe this game unless you're familiar with it. I'm not going to start spoiling it, but essentially, if you like the other Kingdom Hearts games, you'll probably like or love this one. Lots of new Disney and Pixar worlds to explore, and a lot of conclusions to character storylines and plot threads. Though, of course, they do leave it somewhat open-ended for potential sequels, as you might expect from a game series with so many games. But overall, I thought it was pretty good. I was satisfied by it. Not perfect, and still a little convoluted, but what are you gonna do? It's Kingdom Hearts. So, next up we have a game that is very different from the Disney style of the last one. In fact, you could almost call it a polar opposite, and that is Resident Evil 2. And Resident Evil 2, this is technically a remake of the old game, which I believe first came out on the PlayStation, if I'm not mistaken. But because I never had a PlayStation, and never got around to playing any of the various re-releases of that version, I never did play Resident Evil 2 until the remake, and I gotta say, it's a very good game. I really enjoyed this. I only did play through the first route as Leon. I haven't played everything this game has to offer, but I did at least play through to the credits rolled once. And this is a game that I think if you want a good mix of horror and action and puzzles, it is fantastic. It's got a good, tense, creepy atmosphere, great graphics, some very freaky creatures and enemies you have to kill or just straight up avoid because you can't kill them. And there's not really that much else to say. It's your typical Resident Evil game as you might expect, just with better graphics and better controls, a more modern take on the Resident Evil formula. But if that all sounds interesting to you and you haven't played it yet, I believe it's been on sale a lot lately, so I would definitely recommend it. But yes, that was Resident Evil 2. And next up is a game I do not have a case for, because it does not have a physical version. It was only released as a download for PC. And that is, and I'll put an image for it right here, Hypnospace Outlaw. And this is one of my favorite games of this year, and one of the most unique games I've ever played. I absolutely loved Hypnospace Outlaw, but because it is not super well known, I bet the majority of you are sitting here wondering, Matt, just what is Hypnospace Outlaw? Well, I'm going to try to tell you. It's a game that I think is best experienced for yourself instead of having you be told about it. But to boil it down to basics, it is essentially a game set in a alternate universe version of 1999, and you play an internet moderator of sorts for Hypnospace, which is a version of the internet that people browse and visit in their sleep using a headband. It's like they dream through the internet, or however you want to describe it. And essentially it is a sort of reimagining slash parody slash recreation of the internet of the 1990s, the early internet. And that is, of course, with all of its quirks and weird stuff, like lots of MIDI music on pages, lots of GeoCities websites with terrible artistic taste, and various weird, sketchy type of stuff. Basically the Wild West era of the internet put into a video game form. And your role in Hypnospace Outlaw as a moderator is to browse the Hypnospace internet and find and report various violations of the rules or laws. And that can be anything from harassment to copyright infringement to malware and so on. And you basically just get a bunch of cases sent to you that you have to solve by browsing the internet and finding little hidden secrets and not so hidden, very obvious violations. But it is a game that is pretty much a detective game at its core. But there's a lot more to it. It gives you lots of the story are presented in a somewhat familiar manner. And despite none of these people being real, by the end of the game I had quite a connection in my mind with many of them, despite the fact that all I'm doing is basically reporting the ones who do wrong. You can barely even interact with them beyond that, but as a result of seeing all these people's pages and getting to know who they are and how they interact, by the end, it's actually a pretty moving story at times. I found it very entertaining and amusing, as well as deeply sad and profound at times, so there's not really too much I can say without getting into spoilers, but for me, this was a fantastic game and a very unique, worthwhile one. I can't guarantee that everyone's going to like it, but I guess the closest game I can compare it to that you might be aware of is Papers, Please. It kind of has a similar style of information gathering and comparing notes and things like that to try and do the right thing. And so I would highly, highly, highly recommend it if any of you think that sounds interesting at all. So yes, again, that is Hypnospace Outlaw. And next is a game that I had some very mixed feelings on throughout my playtime, but ultimately I would say it was one of my favorites this year, and that is Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. So, some of you may be aware that this is a game, the latest game by From Software, the developers of such difficult games like Dark Souls and Bloodborne. And in that arena, this game definitely does not disappoint. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this is probably the single most difficult game I have ever finished. And as a result, like I said, I have some mixed feelings on it. This year's highest highs and lowest lows probably all came from this game. Basically, at all times playing this game, I was either incredibly satisfied with myself for succeeding, or incredibly frustrated with myself at not doing so. And I did find it more frustrating than Dark Souls and Bloodborne. I'm not entirely sure why, but I have some ideas. And essentially it boils down to the fact that this game is generally much less forgiving than the others, in combination with the fact that while it is much faster paced than things like Dark Souls, it still has a control system where your inputs are queued, kind of lined up beforehand, and you have to wait for the animations to finish before you can do more stuff. And as a result, to me, it didn't really click until very far into the game, because I often felt a bit like the game was dropping my inputs because of the input queuing. Personally, I prefer games like Dark Souls, that kind of speed for input queuing, where I can see the animations play out and they're slow enough that it all kind of has a feeling of needing to wait for things to happen. But this game can be so fast-paced at times with the attacks you need to parry and deflect and so on, that it was hard to break out of the mindset of being able to just instantly do everything as soon as I wanted to. So, hopefully that makes sense if you haven't played it, but overall, it is a game that you have to play in a very particular way, or you will be demolished. But, like I said, when you do succeed at this game, you feel incredible. And so, if you are willing to put up with the challenge and get used to a strict system of gameplay, and you want to feel like a really cool ninja, I can't think of many games better than Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. And so, after Sekiro was a game that some of you may have heard of, Tetris any ordinary Tetris. It was Tetris Effect. And for those of you unfamiliar with Tetris Effect, it is at its core a Tetris game where you sort falling blocks to clear lines and so on. And aside from one or two extra new mechanics, it's basically just standard Tetris. But where it differs is the presentation. It is a game not entirely unlike an older puzzle game some of you may be aware of, and that is Luminous. Where in Luminous, each level was not just a level number going up as your points went up, but each level was kind of its own skin, they called it, with its own song and visuals, and the movements you make in the game would actually trigger instruments and sound effects to create a very immersive audiovisual experience. And Tetris Effect is essentially that. If I'm not mistaken, I think Tetris Effect may have partly been developed by some of the same people as Luminous, so that makes sense. But Tetris Effect, if you want to play Tetris and feel tripped out, there is no better way to do it. I don't have PlayStation VR, but it also has a PSVR mode, so you can see the trippy particle effects and visualizations all around you in 360 degrees, which I imagine is probably amazing. But yeah, there's not much else to say about Tetris Effect. It's a very cool version of Tetris, and I would recommend it for sure, if that interests you. And next is a game that was very popular when it came out, but I think it came out in 2018, and that is Marvel's SpiderMan for the PlayStation 4. And I thought this was a great game. It's got good gameplay, good graphics, good story, it's well paced. My only gripe with it is that at the end of the day, it kind of feels not entirely original. Like, the gameplay is kind of just an amalgamation of different gameplay types that have already been done, like beat 'em up kind of action games and open world RPG type stuff. The story mostly just borrows from other well-known Spider-Man stories and so on, and despite all that, it does all that very well. It's basically a collection of things that have been done before, but executed very well. It's a very polished game. And so, if you don't mind having something that's not entirely original, I would definitely recommend this if it interests you. Just a very good game that, in the words of some very memed about game journalists, makes you feel like Spider-Man. But yeah, I enjoyed it, even if it didn't blow my mind. And after that, we have the first Nintendo Switch game of the year. For me, of course. And that was Super Mario Maker 2. And this is, if you're not familiar with it, exactly what it sounds like. It's a game where you can make and share Mario levels and play ones by other people that have been shared online. And there's not really too much else I can say about it. It's pretty much what you expect. It's got some very cool variety in the types of objects and items you can use to build stages, but admittedly, I'm not much of a stage builder myself. Where I had a lot of fun with this was playing other people's stages and seeing the very inventive and creative things that people came up with. And on top of that, it's got a fairly decent story mode. A lot of the levels are shorter than your standard Mario game, but it shows an interesting variety of systems that are enabled by all the different items and gameplay modes that are available in the Super Mario Maker 2. You can make all your levels look like different versions of Mario, like the original or new Super Mario Brothers and so on, but if you played the Wii version a few years back, you probably are already familiar with that. Overall, I would recommend it if you like Mario games and you want to be able to experiment and see the next up is a game called Catherine Full Body. And this is actually a sort of remake or remaster of a 2011 game called Catherine. And this is a very unique and sometimes very strange game that I really, really loved. It actually caught me off guard with how much I enjoyed it. I'd always heard good things about it, but never gave the original a try until this remake came out. And for those of you unfamiliar with Catherine, which I imagine many of you may be, and many of you may be very confused by this cover and the name of the game, I would probably call this game a romantic horror puzzle game of sorts. It's really a mix of a few different things, but I'll do my best to describe it. Essentially, you play a guy who is not super happy in his relationship with a woman named Catherine, but Catherine seems to want to get very serious and settle down and get married and maybe have kids and so on. And at the same time, his life is interrupted by another Catherine, who he begins having an affair with. And as a result of this affair, he starts having nightmares. And in those nightmares, he is forced to climb nearly endless towers of blocks that he has to push and pull and make stairs out of to escape a looming threat that threatens to eat him from below or kill him. And it's not entirely clear what's going on, but that's where the mystery of the game lies. Essentially, 1/3 of this game is climbing block puzzles by moving blocks in and out and sideways to climb and make towers. Another third of this game is a sort of social simulator where it's kind of half dating simulator and half hanging out in a bar with your friends and talking about life simulator. And the other third is pretty much just anime cutscenes tying everything together. And I found it all very engrossing and unique and had a very interesting style to it. I would say it's almost a story that's somewhere in between satire on lots of tropes about dating and relationships and how they're portrayed in media, and also some very interesting, thought-provoking perspectives on how relationships and friendships and socialization work, as well as a bit of a supernatural element to it, but I won't spoil exactly what I mean by that. But overall, I thought this was a very engrossing, very fun game. I was never bored by it, and I was always interested to see what happened next. And don't let the marketing for this game turn you away. It does sort of seem like something that's kind of a lewd game, if you know what I mean. But that's not really what it is at its core. I mean, it's got little hints of that as necessary to propel the story, but they are very much not the focus, and this is not exactly an adults-only game, if that's what you're worried about. So I wouldn't worry about that if it is something that is making you apprehensive. I would very much recommend the game if any of it sounds interesting to you, though, because I really loved it. Probably one of my favorites of the year. And next up is a game that I haven't finished yet, but I've been playing bit by bit. And that is Control. And this is a very cool game. I have some mixed feelings on the gameplay, but the overall vibe and atmosphere and story of this game are very cool. It's very much up my alley. And if I'm not mistaken, this game's story and world were maybe partly inspired by things like the SCP Foundation. So if you like SCP stuff, like my SCP videos, you may find some of this game's plot and world interesting. It's not quite super into that SCP style, but it seems like it could have been influenced for sure. And essentially this game is a sort of third-person shooter with telekinetic powers and so on, set in a sort of Metroid gameplay is very cool and flashy. It's got a very robust physics system, and you can destroy and throw around lots of stuff. But I found it gets a little repetitive for me at times because it's relatively simple once you get all the basic components of the gameplay. And for me, it had some very serious difficulty spikes where one moment I would be having zero trouble whatsoever with a big battle, and then the next battle would annihilate me, and then the battle after that would be super easy. It kind of just feels all over the place for me. Like I said, I haven't finished it yet. I'm maybe 3/4 of the way through, but I'm enjoying it a lot, even if the gameplay quirks are not entirely my style, I guess. I'm sure you know what I mean, but yeah, I would recommend it even if it's not a perfect game, because it is definitely a game with a lot of style, and it tries to do some interesting things that I think are very cool. So that is Control. And next is a game that definitely did not come out this year, but I got it for $5 because it's been out for a few years, and I think it was way more than worth the $5, and that is Titanfall 2. And this is the sequel to Titanfall, which might be obvious, but it is, unlike the first Titanfall, a Titanfall game with a proper story mode, single-player campaign. And that's essentially what I bought it for. I heard it was a very good campaign, and though it's a little short, I thought it was fantastic. It very much feels like a modern take on the old-school single-player FPS campaign, but with some interesting twists in the way you move around. There's lots of acrobatics and jumping and wall running and things like that, but also lots of old-fashioned shooting. And that's pretty much all I have to say about the single player. It's a great, well-done, well-polished campaign. And of course there is the multiplayer, which admittedly I have not played because I'm too cheap to pay for Xbox Live. But I imagine it's fairly similar to the multiplayer on Titanfall 1, which I have on PC, and that was quite fun. And so, yeah, if you want a first-person shooter that is well-made, maybe with some little twists and so on, and you want something that's cheap, I imagine you can still get this pretty cheap, I would definitely recommend Titanfall 2. And next up is the game that I bought this year that probably had the most important effect on my life. And that is a little game that kind of came out of nowhere called Ring Fit Adventure. Some of you may be very confused and have never heard of this game and are thinking, Matt, what is Ring Fit Adventure and how could it have changed your life so dramatically? Well, maybe not dramatically, but it has changed my life. Ring Fit Adventure is a new Nintendo game that, again, if you do know what this game is like, you probably think it looks pretty silly. And it does look pretty silly, even having played it. But it is a game where to play the game, you have to do exercise. And as someone who has never enjoyed exercising, I always find it very boring or tedious. I have been playing this game almost every day since late October, and I am not anywhere near getting bored with it, and I'm feeling much better as a result. So, if you want to exercise and you want a way to motivate yourself through video games, I would highly recommend Ring Fit Adventure, but still, I'm sure some of you are thinking, what is Ring Fit Adventure? Well, let me tell you. Ring Fit Adventure is a sort of RPG, a turn-based RPG, where to move around the game world, you have to run in place, and to battle enemies in the turn-based combat system, you have to do various exercises instead of just pushing an A button or something like that. So, for example, say you want to do a standard attack or something, you would fought and how good your form is, you will do more or less damage. And there's a huge variety of exercises that you can unlock and assign for various options, and there's really a lot to it. It's a fully fledged RPG, really. But I'm sure some of you are still wondering, but Matt, how do you exercise to play this game? And that's where the ring in Ring Fit Adventure comes in. Here is the Ring Con, as Nintendo calls it. What you do is you insert the Joy-Con controller up here, and then this is effectively a Pilates ring with measurements of force and angle. And so you can do things like squeeze it, or pull it, and tilt it, and so on, and it'll measure what your body is doing and how much force you're using to do it, along with a leg strap that you insert the other Joy-Con into and strap to your thigh. And it is a very quirky game with some funny, weird characters and a cute art style. And yeah, I think it is fantastic. And if you are interested in getting in better shape yet can't motivate yourself to exercise and think this sounds like an interesting idea, I think it is absolutely worth the $80. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about Ring Fit Adventure, but I love it. And because of its impact on my life, I would say it is one of the best games I've played this year for sure. So, next is a game that I imagine some of you are expecting based on a recent video I did, in which I said words such as Mario and Mario, and that is not Mario's Mansion, but Luigi's Mansion 3. And this is the third Luigi's Mansion game, in which you have a vacuum cleaner and suck up ghosts and find money and treasures and explore a haunted place that Luigi could not want to be in less. And it is a very good game. It has some of the best graphics I've seen on the Switch, and it is never not funny to see Luigi freak out at pretty much everything in this game. On top of that, it is very satisfying to suck everything up with your vacuum and cause a bunch of havoc with the physics engine. And while it's not particularly challenging and definitely not scary, I think it is very enjoyable and even relaxing at times. That said, I'm not quite finished with it yet because personally I find that it gets a little repetitive as it goes on. Unfortunately, you end up unlocking most of the things in the game pretty early on, and as a result, you're not really faced with any new mechanics or challenges after the first few levels, and so it gets a little repetitive in my mind. That said, I do intend on finishing it at some point, and if you don't mind a bit of repetition, I think it is a very well-made, enjoyable game for sure. So yes, Luigi's Mansion 3, very good game. And next up is what I think I would call my game of the year, and that is, drumroll please, Death Stranding. Now I know this game was quite divisive among people, so some of you may have laughed at the screen when I put this up on the screen. I'm watching you. So yes, I can understand why this game was so divisive, but some of those reasons are the same reasons I loved it. This is one of the first games I played in a very long time that I feel was not afraid to take massive risks in basically every area. It is a game that is the result of Hideo Kojima, famous for the Metal Gear Solid series, doing basically whatever he wants with a huge budget, even if it means not everyone will like it. artistic integrity. Ultimately, this game is a very high-concept game about a post-apocalyptic world, or a post-apocalyptic America, to be specific, that is falling apart after being stricken, I always forget how to say that, by an event called the Death Stranding, in which the worlds of the living and the dead become somewhat intertwined, and various catastrophic things start happening, like void outs in which the dead will try to consume the bodies of the living and cause nuclear explosions. And long story short, you play a man who is tasked by the President of the United States to walk across America and deliver packages between the fragments of society that remain to try and reconnect civilization and bring America back online, if that makes sense. Of course, there's much more to it, including things like dying and coming back to life being a normal thing, babies in jars that can help you see ghosts. That sounded like I said goats, didn't it? Ghosts. And lots of other things, but all done in a very stylistic way that feels like Hideo Kojima is trying to make a movie of sorts more than a game at times. It does have very long cutscenes, and very many of them, so if you don't like cutscenes, it might not be the game for you. And at times, you could describe it as a very advanced walking simulator. You have to do things like balance the cargo on your back by using the triggers to not fall over while you're walking in a straight line if it's too heavy. It's a very strange game that many people found tedious and boring, but I found it very satisfying on the contrary. And I can't entirely articulate why, but I very much enjoyed it, and I very much respect the risks that Kojima had to make this game. So I really admired it. I found the story interesting. I found the production value excellent. I love the graphics, the music, the characters. There's not really much bad I have to say about this game, so it is my game of the year. Death Stranding. And the last game I have to talk about today is another game that was a bit divisive, and that is Pokemon Sword. Or in an alternate universe, I would be holding up a Pokemon Shield, but they're basically the same game with a few different Pokemon. And Pokemon Sword is, as you might expect, another Pokemon game. And really, this is a game that feels like an upscaled 3DS game in almost every way. It is not a game that feels like it is with the times. It feels very basic, very simple, excessively easy for the most part. But that said, I still like it a lot. I haven't played a ton of it yet. I'm maybe 4 or 5 hours into it. But at its core, it's still that addictive loop of Pokemon battling and training and catching. And as long as you're entertained by that alone, I don't think you can go wrong with this. If you're a particularly avid Pokemon fan who's been trying to collect all the Pokemon across generations, I would not necessarily recommend this though, because as has been very controversial, it is the first major Pokemon game in the entire series to not allow you to transfer some of your Pokemon to it from the past. The Pokedex does not feature every single Pokemon. But if that doesn't bother you, and personally it doesn't bother me because I've not been storing up Pokemon over the years, you might enjoy it, as long as you like that basic Pokemon formula. It's a game that I can't say is great by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm enjoying it a lot nonetheless. And at the end of the day, that's pretty much all that matters anyway. So, well, maybe not all that matters, but you know what I mean. Sometimes you just don't really care. And Pokemon Sword does thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed learning my thoughts about all the games I played in 2019. I will see you next time with another video.